Yo, what's going on? So right now I am in Finsbury Circus, which is not too far from Liverpool Street. I've come down here to do a body fat reading, a DEXA scan with a company called, I can't remember the name of it actually. Company called My Vital Metrics. So hopefully running a little bit late, but I should be there soon. Yeah, almost there. Looks like this might be it, number 29. Okay. Where's the reception? So I have finally arrived at My Vital Metrics, and this is the machine which I'm going to be using right here for my DEXA scan, and from what I understand, a 3D body scan in here also. So here is Owen, who is the founder of this place here. He's gonna take me through everything, explain the procedure, and no doubt print a report to see how lean or fat I am. This should be interesting. I just need to fill out a form and then I'll be getting started. Scanning. Click ready.
Okay, yep, so you can click ready. And now after you hit start, it's just going to ask you to grab these handles from down by your sides. So you just grab them and stand up with them. Okay?
All right.
So hit start, grab the handles. Good. Okay, so nice and relaxed. When that countdown finishes, the scan will begin. It's going to take 10 seconds. Okay, we're all done.
All right.
So if you just lie down with your head at this end.
Head at this end?
Yep, face up.
Face up.
Okay. So, good. So your hips, can I just get them to move over just a little bit? Yeah,
to the right.
Great. So palms flat to the table, fingers together. Now, are you able to get your arms closer to your body? Yeah. Kind of straighten them out a bit. Yep. Good. Okay. I'm just going to see, can we nudge this in a little bit? Great. Okay, perfect. You okay to hold that for 3 minutes?
Yeah. 3 minutes.
3 minutes. So the table's going to start moving now. Just remain still. All done. You can hop on up.
Oh, right, cool. Okay. Sweet. So, scan is now complete, and figures are being rounded up on the computer. Maybe the computer's laughing at me. We'll soon find out. Wow, so this is my 3D scan. Interesting.
So what that gets us, we've got all of our circumference measurements. Okay.
Okay.
When you get a second 3D body, they show next to each other any new circumferences and then any difference. Okay. So what we can look at today is issues of symmetry. So there's an interesting difference between your upper arms. So I'm going to have a look into that. I don't think that's going to be a muscle mass difference. I think it's likely to be positional.
Okay.
So we'll look at that. Perfectly even on the thighs, very, very close on the calves. So everything else is looking pretty good. The other thing that we can kind of do, depending on your kind of goals, and let's say, if the aim was to kind of increase mass, when you get a second 3D body, the two bodies all show next to each other, you'll get a second cross-sectional outline, and we're able to kind of see if the mass is coming out at a particular part of the chest, or if it's coming out of the shoulders, what's going on. Of course, we can also take kind of circumferences and compare them at different parts of the arm. Let's say you wanted to kind of work on kind of that forearm and the brachioradialis kind of area. Do you know what I mean? So all of this, all the way up and down, we can kind of do a comparison.
It's amazing.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is a little bit on posture. Okay, so what I look for in posture, shoulder positioning, nice and far back, so that's good. It's difficult to tell whether it's actually just the mass of your anterior deltoid, or whether you're actually quite internally rotated. I think there's probably an element of both. So just I'm sure you're doing plenty of external rotation stuff. But getting those stretches in will just kind of assist with that, if it to the extent that it is an internal rotation to the shoulder.
Right. Okay.
Shoulder position, though, what I look for is the acromion process roughly in line with the ear, and yours is bang on. I look for a long smooth curve through the neck, which you've got. I've got a long and a long smooth curve through the thoracic spine, which you've got. So when we look at lumbar spine, you've got a very, very deep curvature, and once again, a lot of that is due to kind of muscle mass at the top of the lumbar here, but there is a hint of an anteriorly tilted pelvis, so tight hip flexors, not surprising at all, but just be aware of it, because that is putting your kind of lower back into a permanently shortened kind of position. But overall, not too bad. Not too bad at all.
What would you suggest to loosen up the hip flexors? What would be the best thing?
Yeah, I mean, hip flexor stretching on all kinds of angles, kind of your your two right angle kind of stretches down the side, the usual hip flexor stretch. It's just kind of trying to really focus in on that, and getting frictions and things like that in there as well. So Theragun, or just a thumb.
Golf ball, maybe.
Golf ball, yeah, all of those kind of things. Right. Like I said, there's always going to be an element, given the amount of muscle mass that you've got, that you will have that. And also, like we sort of talk about hip flexor stretches a lot, but the other thing is, of course, the lower back, just ensuring that you're able to, round out your lower back if you need to, obviously, so stretching those lower erectors and making sure that they're able to move as well.
Right.
Obviously, for any of your strength movements, you absolutely want them in that tense position, but you want to be able to kind of move out of that as well.
Of course.
Okay, so sorry. Okay, so shoulder positioning, it actually does look, so there's a little bit of an asymmetry here. So your right shoulder is a bit lower. Are you right-handed?
I am.
Okay, so this would be fairly standard. Like our dominant hands tend to sit a little bit lower than the offhand. It's not particularly marked on you, but it is a tiny bit lower. Our offhands, because they don't do quite so much reaching, stretching, pulling in day-to-day life, they do tend to get a little bit more locked up into place. For you, getting like a golf ball or a hard hockey ball in and around the structures of particularly on the left, around the shoulder blade there, just trying to ease out the tension around that area, that can help a lot. Just to kind of even this out. And that difference that we saw in the circumference is not a difference in actual muscle mass, it's simply a difference because we're cutting the arm at a slightly different point. Okay?
Right.
Yeah. Like I said, that it's fairly standard that people have that. Yours is not particularly pronounced, it's nothing to worry about. But, we want to just offset anything that we can before anything develops into pain patterns.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
First up, we get a bone density for you today.
Okay.
So effectively, you do get a T-score. So this graph here kind of shows your bone density compared to the population. And this line in the middle is the mean, is the average for the population, and this is 2 standard deviations below, this is 2 standard deviations above. You are bang on the mean, so your bones are absolutely fine, no problem whatsoever. Okay, so good strong healthy bones, nothing to worry about there.
Cool.
Okay, next up, body composition. So you guessed around 9 or 10, and you are absolutely right, 10.3.
10.3% body fat. Okay.
Okay, so the next thing that we do is we break it down. We look at the fat that you have around your midsection and the fat that you have around your thighs, because these are the places that people tend to store most of their fat. And we also look at the ratio between those two. Okay.
Right.
So this fat at the top is called the android fat. The fat at the around the thighs, hips and thighs is called gynoid fat. Okay?
Gynoid.
Typically android because that's where men tend to put on fat, gynoid because that's where women tend to put on fat.
Right, got you.
On average. So for you, around the midsection, you're 11.2%, and around the thighs, you're 11.8.
Right.
Okay. So that gives you a ratio of 0. And this is the android to gynoid ratio we're looking at, and that is 0.94. So what that says, the thing is, you've got not very much fat at all anyway. But were you to, let's say, put on a whole lot of fat or lose a lot of fat, what we can kind of say is that by and large that would go off and on evenly, upper and lower.
Okay.
So you're not someone who disproportionately tends to put fat on around the middle but not the thighs, or around the thighs but not the middle. But different people that we get in have an android to gynoid ratio that will differ. Obviously women will have a much lower ratio, so sometimes I see as low as 0.45. That means they're more than twice as likely or twice as much fat around the thighs than around the middle. And some men that we get through, of course, have a figure that is significantly above 1, so like 1.3, meaning that they're much more predisposed to putting on fat around the midsection, around the belly, than around the thighs. So these.
When you say predisposed, you mean because they're men?
Well, it's about a mix of things. It's about their genetics, and it is also about their hormonal state. Testosterone does have an effect of tending to put fat on around the middle if you put it on, and estrogen dominant types of fat deposition have them go on around the thighs instead. So women with kind of strong estrogen patterns tend to put on fat around the thighs. Interestingly, of course, occasionally when we see women with things that affect their estrogen, like polycystic ovaries and things like that, it tends to be a bit more towards the midsection as well. So anything that can kind of disrupt your hormonal balance can change this effect. Likewise with men, if I find men who are putting a huge amount of fat on around their thighs, I will send them away to kind of find out what their testosterone and estrogen are doing, because it's
like for a hormones test?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, for a blood test.
Right.
Okay,
cool.
So next up we look at something that we wouldn't have been able to see via any other method, and that is visceral fat. Okay?
Okay.
So for you, your visceral fat is sitting at 70.4 centimeters squared. Anything below 100 is absolutely fine. So you're right in the middle of the healthy range there.
Right.
Absolutely no problem. Like I said, from 100 to 160 is considered increased risk of cardiovascular disease, and 160 plus is considered high risk. Okay. Below 100, there's no data to suggest that, 40 is better than 70 or anything like that. We just know that at the 100 point, that's when the correlation with cardiovascular risk factors becomes too great to ignore.
Right. And I don't know if it's too early to ask questions, but like, how would a person lower the number?
So if someone does have a high number, the key things that affect visceral fat disproportionately to others are sleep, stress, and alcohol. When I find people who are, let's say, otherwise lean, but have a high visceral fat,
That happens?
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So it's that can happen if you aren't eating an excess of calories necessarily, but you have maybe very disordered sleep, you have kind of high stress, and you're drinking a lot. Any of those can kind of disrupt it. One of the highest visceral fats that I recorded was from a night security officer. So doing night shifts, sometimes doing day shifts, so they were switching between, so their sleep was all over the place. And then at the end, on a weekend, in order to help them get to sleep, they were drinking quite a lot of whiskey. So, so that kind of thing. But in all other respects, from a composition point of view, they were doing just fine. But visceral fat alone is sufficient to kind of sort of say, well, it is highly likely that they've got other cardiovascular risk factors.
So a person can have a low subcutaneous fat and high visceral?
Yes.
What's the purpose of visceral?
So visceral fat is a fat that kind of sits just around the organs, in particular around the small intestines and under the liver. It actually acts as part of the immune system. So it's packed with macrophages. The thought is that those macrophages are there to help with any pathogens that might escape from the gut. But when there's too much of it, it kind of then ends up releasing a whole lot of inflammatory cytokines. And when that is kind of going on just outside the liver, the thinking is that can kind of cause dysregulation within the liver.
Right. So, okay.
So next up, we're looking at your lean index. So this is a measure of how much muscle you have for your height. So the calculation is kind of kilograms of muscle divided by your height squared. So it's actually a pretty similar calculation to BMI, but we're only counting muscle here.
Okay.
So for you, your index is a 29.2. Now, I'm happy with anything above 19.8 for men. So you are way over here, and that is I think the highest lean index that I've ever seen. So obviously, you have an enormous amount of muscle for your height, and well done. And that's going to then kind of impact and help with our calculations around your resting metabolic rate.
Okay, awesome. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you found that very useful. I'm just running through the blueprint which was given to me of what I need to do ongoing. So I just want to run by some stuff which I found very interesting. And one of them was my body fat reading, which was 10.3%. The last time I had a body fat reading back in 2015, it was about 12.9, I think, or 12.8. I didn't actually go through this in this particular filming, but off camera, when I was speaking to Owen, he mentioned that there has been an update with the calibration. So for those who have had a DEXA scan before, there was a very old system which was used. And he explained the details of why it was not accurate. Certain numbers were added on top of the scan to make up for something which they said was lost, and it just basically gave an inaccurate reading. And for some people, it could feel a bit, demoralizing, a little bit like, "Oh, really? I thought it'd be better than that, you know? Whereas for me, like looking in the mirror, that just says it all. But like, having it on paper will give me an understanding. Okay, this is where I'm at. But yeah, 10.3. I can't remember the visceral fat levels, but visceral fat was in the good range. So it mentioned something about below 100 is perceived as good. And if you have anything between, let's say, I think you said like 30 and 70, or I can't remember what numbers he said, could be making it up. There's no proof to say that the lower number would be better than the higher number. As long as it's below 100, you're not going to fall in that range where you have a high correlation to inflammation or cardiovascular disease. So I found that very interesting. And another thing I found very interesting about that was the thing of it's got nothing to do with food. So you've got subcutaneous and visceral fat. With subcutaneous fat, the visible fat, or superficial in some cases, because it's not as dangerous. It's food choices that will show your body fat levels. So excessive carbohydrates or processed food, trans fats, or just eating in excess, and especially the wrong foods, will translate in subcutaneous fat, whereas it won't necessarily show in visceral fat. And one other interesting thing he said, or a couple, was you even have people who are really lean and potentially skinny, who don't have much subcutaneous fat but have very high visceral fat levels, which explains to you that it's down to your lifestyle. So what things did he say affect visceral fat levels? First of all, visceral fat is potentially dangerous because it is around your vital organs. So the things which could affect it is lifestyle, such as sleep. If you're not sleeping enough, then this could create problems. So, if you're working long hours to try and make that money, and you're not sleeping enough because you're constantly chasing cash, that could be a problem. It could be, there could be many reasons. People who are studying excessively, or just watching late night Netflix, that's not going to benefit you. So if you want to reduce the amount of visceral fat, definitely get more sleep. Drinking alcohol was another one. So I don't know how much you would need to drink in order to have excessive visceral fat levels. Maybe sticking to a couple of units might be safe. I guess it depends on each individual and their body's ability to reduce visceral fat. But what was the other thing? The other thing that affects it was stress. Stress levels. If your stress levels are high, yeah, everybody has some form of stress, but I think meditation itself is a very good way of mitigating stress. So try to do some form of meditation every single day. And it's not to say that stress will just be eliminated, but it will increase your resilience to stress. So when stress comes to you, your body's levels of stress is going to be far less. So it's going to have less of an impact, reducing the amount of visceral fat. So yeah, like it's almost a question of why would a person decide to have a body fat reading anyway? Well, with that, it's probably easier to calculate what your basal metabolic rate is as well. So your body's um, resting, um, resting basal metabolic rate. Resting metabolic rate, is that the same thing? I'm not too sure, but like your body's metabolism, like how it's doing, you can calculate all these things. You can calculate how much food you should be eating. Once you've got an accurate measure, all right, how much body fat do I have? Okay, this is how much I should be consuming to make sure I'm not increasing the amount of body fat that I have, unless it is very important for you to start increasing your body fat. It's going to vary per person, and it depends on whatever your goal is, really. You know, some people are really trying to put on weight, you know, due to genetics. Some people struggle to put on weight. So, you know, having your body fat read and, you know, all other bits of information, you can work out, all right, how much you should be consuming. Yeah, I think it kind of helps you to um, tailor your diet to improve your lifestyle rather than just guesswork by stepping on a scale and thinking, this is too heavy or this is too light. Yeah, it's more accurate. It's more accurate. Yeah, so they give you bone density information. Do I feel I needed that? Don't know. Don't know. Not at this stage, but it's good to know that I don't have brittle bones. My bones are strong. You know, and it said that when you do resistance training, your bone does get strong. The 3D scan was very interesting. I did like that. You know, it gave me an understanding of where my asymmetry was. I think around near my shoulders. I think my anterior delt is slightly exaggerated, pronounced, or whatever term was used. So I definitely need to work on that to create more symmetry. Perhaps exercising the antagonist muscle a little bit more, like the posterior delt. Yeah, and the lower back as well. Definitely need to work my hip flexors a bit more. So these sort of things are very handy because if you want to prevent injury in the future, at the moment, I don't really have any injuries. I think I had one recently with my knees where I was training very excessively. But, you know, understanding where I might be working too hard or not enough, I can make these adjustments to prepare for the future so that I don't have any issues. So it's definitely something I would consider. Anything else to go by on here? Maybe not for now. But if it's something that you might consider yourself, then check out My Vital Metrics. My Vital Metrics. They're based in London. And they've given me a code SNIPESFIT. SNIPESFIT gives you a discount. I think it's a 10% discount. So check them out and see what information you can provide for yourself and see how you can optimize your life. If you've got any questions, leave it in the comment below. But for now, take care. Peace.